This croc is not relaxing in normal deep water. This Deinosuchus is part of a giant build, with which I want to showcase you what is possible when you combine many of my techniques I've shown you over the past few months and weeks for Jurassic World Evolution 3.
Please remember, if your kayak becomes beached at any point in the tour, remain seated and our expert staff will come to you.
At some points I will give you tips and tricks how you can improve your own technique dealing with the FreeBuild-Mod from Kaiodenic. And at other points I will point you to more detailed tutorials so this video doesn't get completely out of hand. The key components of this speed build / showcase / tutorial will be how to get swimming dinosaurs, or in this case reptilians, into the lagoon for a shared enclosure with marine reptiles. How to blend it naturally in the environment, combine it with the river cruise. I will make an underwater attraction that your guests can walk into even if it's inside the lagoon, using my shark tunnel technique, using a building underwater to get them there, and along the way you will see a few other things like a real waterfall for the lagoon, or how to get more precision into your building technique. Getting dinosaurs or any land animal to cross the lagoon could be very easy with the delivery zones because they negate collision. But to get a better effect and not glitching around animals, I will use the river cruise technique, which is rather complicated but allows to get a real large space in which swimming land animals can mingle with marine reptiles inside the lagoon. I will link the large tutorial so that you can build this too in the description, and just show you here what I planned. I wanted a huge but oddly shaped area where my Crocs would swim, and as always checked collision now and then when I built my stuff, if the lagoon cruise technique did its magic. For this build I chose to install Cry's Better Lagoons mod, because I wanted to get the riverbank as low as possible and don't want to hide those ugly fences. A few rocks here and there are the basics, but I wanted land animals to come as close to the edge as possible. For this I work with flattening foundation pieces to get a ground nice and flush, but I had to remember that there was water in there, just not visible. So after deleting the water I could raise the ground to the perfect level, hiding the flattening foundation pieces just a pixel under the lagoon walls. I put them all around except for the two places where the crossing is supposed to be. And then comes the part hiding these walls. I used grass floor pieces for this and built kind of a casing, I would say, that I could put around the walls of the lagoon, in this case not the concrete walls but the beach walls, to put it in the crossing section. Here it's important to know the dinosaurs will clip through there, the Crocs of course as well. That's the whole point of the lagoon cruise technique. So you have to hide where they're clipping through, or that it will look like they're swimming through a wall. In my last builds I made kind of a rock tunnel where they swam through, but this time I wanted an open crossing, which is kind of a contradiction in terms. It had to look open, but it could not be open. So what you're gonna do, you use rock and foliage and make some kind of a swampy part covered in any kind of vegetation. so that you just can see how your animals swim in the green, vanish inside this whole, let's call it jungle or mangrove, and then come out on the other side. As you can see, there are hundreds of rocks in this build and hundreds of pieces of foliage. So you have to take your time. Make it pretty. Make it look natural, if that's what you want it to be. And to build it, sometimes you have to bring some pieces out of the way, like these trees here. If you do, move them in crits. Then you can bring them back into the perfect position afterwards. To make the lagoon part more interesting, I built some different levels, a deep and a more shallow part of the lagoon. This way I can control that my guests have always something to see. The river cruise will cross the shallow part, and the underwater attraction is of course down in the deep. Another reason for this decision is a practical one. Remember that the delivery zones for the lagoon cruise technique will negate any collision from rocks as well. And I don't want my marine reptiles to clip into the rocks. After the crossing for my swimming dinosaurs or land animals is done, I hide the lagoon walls. I use these grass pieces, one surface flat, one slightly angled into the ground. Collision deactivated in both, so that animals can walk over them. That will ensure that it will blend into the environment as neatly as possible. To make it easier, I make modules that I can copy and build around the whole lagoon. With, of course, rocks again, foliage, moss, trees, bushes, little bit of soil, and I tried to build in some water so that it looks like a more wet area around my lagoon. Take your time here. It should look good because you will copy it around your lagoon a few dozen times. You of course don't need to build it pixel perfect like I try to do here. The game is built for a larger perspective because the animals are very large. But, well, that's, let's call it my little pedantic quirk. I like my things neat and fitting, and I don't like it when there are seams visible, even if I know you would never see them. This way I built slightly different edges for my lagoon, so that it doesn't look too artificial when I copy them. And in between I began to build the entrance for my river cruise, or the exit, however you want to put it. And I let my first Crocs free to test if everything worked. And I was pretty pleased with the area my Crocs ventured forth from the normal deep water into the lagoon area, without any problem and without glitching around. A little aquatic plant carpet brings life into the lagoon, and as you can see in the background, some Leoplerodon are already swimming inside, sharing the area with my crocodiles. Unfortunately, as far as the game is concerned, they don't really share an area. They are on different planes and can't interact. The Deinosuchus is technically in deep water, and the marine reptiles swim in the lagoon.
Please make
I made the entrance for the river cruise fitting my overall futuristic style, but then came to a part of my build that nearly broke my patience. I won't show you the speed build, because it took me hours, literal hours, to build this one part. I wanted my river cruise to row through a tunnel, and I didn't want them to row through a round one or a normal rectangular one. I built a rectangular one and angled it so it became a diamond shape or rhombus shape. And that is not a problem in this game, as long as you don't want your river cruise to have some turns and bends. And I just can say to you, don't do this. It's exhausting to build it in a diamond shape and then make curves. That took more pieces than my build already had. But at least in the end, it looked like the thing I had envisioned. And then the time came to build the first building into the lagoon directly, because I wanted the river cruise to start inside the lagoon. Here comes a technique in handy that I've shown you in a tutorial on how to perfectly move and place a building with absolute control. You just place down any modular building piece you like. It's important that they are not part of the same group. And then you select both the modular building piece and the building you want to move, and go to Advanced Move. The building no longer jumps to your mouse. It is now perfectly movable on the X and Y axis. Unfortunately, the height or the level and elevation of the building you are not able to change this way. I played around a bit with different orientations of the river cruise building, but decided that I want my canoes to row into the river cruise building directly through the front. For this again I called onto the delivery zone for help. It would allow my kayaks to row through the walls of the building and start the tour from there. Maybe you ask yourself how to get a tour, any tour, but in this case a river cruise, neatly inside these corners without crossing the walls of the tunnel, which would lead for the canoes to hit the walls or the glass and maybe get stuck, or in best case don't get stuck, but it wouldn't look pretty. Well, again, you implement a technique to get more control. Select a piece, any modular building piece, the building, and duplicate it. Place as many as you need down where the corners start. And then you build the tracks starting from the buildings. You just have to keep one thing in mind. When you delete a building, the first track will disappear, but the second, third, and so on will stay. So you can use this to place the tracks down as close as possible to the corner, then delete the buildings, and after that you can make the curve as sharp as needed and without, or at least minimizing, the problem that the track leaves the tunnel you intended to drive it through. After that I built a natural exit for my river cruise so that it could continue outside my lagoon build, and I blended the whole thing into my lagoon. This section will be fenced off inside the lagoon from the marine reptiles or the crocodiles, so my guests don't need a tunnel from the building to the exit of the lagoon and still be safe. Again, strategically placed rocks and foliage will hide the whole construct underneath the build and make the whole thing look like it's totally natural and part of the rest of the more or less safari park I have envisioned. After this step, I started designing the River Cruise building. I even wanted to add a ramp to bring guests visibly on top of the building and use the lagoon bridge glitch to let them walk to the little boathouse, where on top I had envisioned a cafe or some other amenity. But while building the ramp, I noticed a little problem. I had not built the ramp in the right angle to the map borders for it to be perfectly even. And that happened to me, a guy who made a tutorial on how to build perfect ramps. So I had two choices. Change the angle of the building so that the ramp fits. Don't build the ramp straight to the building, but at the right angle for the ramp to be perfect. And both were not something I wanted to do. So I thought the third option is the thing I would do, the most labor intensive. For this you have to know, I never once built a whole park. In hundreds of hours of gameplay, I never built a park. Not one. I make my builds, save them as blueprints, and sometime in the future, I want to put them together in my final dream park. I don't know what to call it. I have a theme, I have a vision, and now I build the puzzle pieces that I put together when I'm ready. There is a map with a few bare bones where I want to place the stuff, but there isn't really anything there yet. Just one build I started, some kind of mountain, and not much else. So I decided here and now I would save this build as it is and put it in my final park. And this will be the perfect opportunity to show you how to put multi-thousand blueprints that can't be saved in one piece perfectly together again, and to start my underwater building or vista point for guests there. But first, a word from our sponsor. My imagination and my tenacity to jump from one thing to another while I wanted to build something else. Sometimes in between I had ideas and made improvements. For example, these rocks with mangroves on them, to blend them into the crossing area and make this more natural and more of a swampy vibe. I created a small set for my build so I could copy them. 3-4 different sets of mangroves on rocks and foliage. And then I sank them onto the water's edge where my crocodiles would cross into the deep water and start swimming to reach the lagoon. On another occasion I dismissed the idea to make this lagoon build part of a river and decided to make it the end of a waterfall and a little lake that's fed by the waterfall. And thanks to Kaiodenics FreeBuild-Mod, it's pretty easy to get a waterfall into the lagoon. The hardest part is that here you get the best effect if you still can see part of the brackish greenish water the deep water creates on the lagoon. For this, the deep water has to be painted on the same elevation as the standard level of the lagoon. If you sink the water deeper, the effects are not the same. You lose the water current at the bottom. So I decided to make this waterfall hide the invisible ground. That's, as you know, is invisible because of the lagoon intersecting with the waterfall. Hide it with rocks and foliage, and then blend in the greenish brackish water and the lagoon with some more pieces of foliage, moss, trees, bushes, grass, so it looks more authentic and natural. And builders, I can't recommend you enough. It really gives the whole build a more cinematic, a more epic feel. This waterfall in the background looks just beautiful. Now let's come back to migrating this thing onto another map. For this I use constructs I call anchor pieces, built out of flattening floor foundation pieces and sometimes out of normal floor, depending which part of the build I connect them with. I made a whole tutorial on the topic of this, but long story short, I used them to connect larger blueprints that cannot be saved in one piece. Sometimes it isn't easy to make this perfect, and as you will see here, I'm fighting with this perfect precision placement, the right angle of my ramp and the right depths of my water, so that afterwards everything fits together nicely. The placement isn't easy, but that's because I made a mistake to build my anchor pieces last and the placement building. It's way easier if you build the whole thing with the right angles and the placement buildings and the anchor pieces from the get-go. Now with this whole lagoon built on my final map, I hope, my final map, I will show you how I did the underwater building and how I get guests inside there. During this I will fast forward through a few mundane steps and I will show you others in more detail. So I cut out a part of the rock wall and put a ramp there, which I have created for another build. I clipped it into the lagoon wall because I want this to be part of the attraction. Using my human dummy I checked for size, and then, as you can see here, the whole magic unfolds on the inside. You cannot see through the wall, but if you're inside of it, the outside is visible. This I will use to my advantage, so that guests can see through a glass window if they walk through this tunnel. Of course they need a little bit of lighting, and after I place down the lights, I will give the backside a rock wall, fitting the rocky ramp I envisioned for this build. This, I have to admit, is a little trick, because the ramp isn't in the right angle and it will not be perfectly even. So a rock ramp it will be. Then comes the glass. Thanks for giving us these glass pieces finally, Frontier. They were needed. But there is a problem, as you see here. From the outside, this glass window will not be visible. We have to find a solution, and I made a fake window on the outside. Building a frame out of rocks and concrete, and faking the visible window frame. Just enough so that it looks good when you look at the whole thing from the outside. Of course, a frame isn't enough. Looking from the outside, there's still the wall of the lagoon. Here, the right decals play an important role, because they have one effect. They are just visible from one side. So I use puddles because they reflect light a little bit and can be used to look like glass or the windows, if you place them right. In the meantime, I made something to get my guests into the wall of the lagoon, because normally they couldn't go through collision. As always, in this case, delivery zones come to the rescue. Placed directly underneath the ramp, they will negate the collision of the lagoon walls and allow my guests to walk down to the vista point I envisioned for them. Then I hit the partition walls and made some doors that looked like they're separated some pieces of the ramp. Maybe a security feature if a break occurs at any point, like a bulkhead on a ship. So if you build something like that, just hide the pieces of the lagoon you can't get rid of. When collision is deactivated, your guests will walk right through those. The next few hours I will rush through with you. Walls and scenery, blending the whole thing into the nature around it, and so on. The stuff you have seen already. In between those steps, I used the monorail glitch because I wanted the monorail to drive through the river feeding this little lake. And for testing, I wanted my guests to get there at some point of the build. If you don't already know how the monorail glitch works, just search for it on YouTube. You will find a dozen good tutorials on this topic. After I'm done with this, I will skip a few more hours of putting down pieces and buildings on the outside, like a restroom and other amenities. Which brings us to the part where I lay down the foundation. Here, really the foundation floor pieces on which I built the building and the area where my guests will venture into and look out into the whole lagoon area. Putting down the building is way easier if you delete part of the lagoon and can work on dry land. It's very important here that you don't delete the whole lagoon. You want your sections to be rebuildable in the same spot as they are supposed to be. Then I sink down the flattening floor foundation pieces a bit and place delivery zones where I want my guests to be able to walk underwater. That's the same way I built my shark tunnel and let guests walk inside there. I bring back the flattening floor foundation pieces and the delivery zones are hidden under there. Then what's left is that your guests need pathing and a building that attracts them, in this case a gallery. Again, let's bring up the speed to 15,000% and skip me building a few things, like a lot of glass, concrete, a hyperloop station, etc, until we come to the interesting point, which is creating the final entrance to the guest area inside the lagoon with a doorway that hides the walls of the lagoon and gives the illusion to be a real doorway for the guests. First, I placed down a frame with wall pieces fitting my design and put it where the walls of the lagoon are visible from the outside. Then I placed down some trims to give it more structure and to hide the illusion of the glass, which I will redo here like I did for the ramp, so that it isn't visible that this is just a decal I placed in a very specific way. And here it comes, the puddle decal again, with its shiny, mirror-like appearance. After I've copied it a few times, I will put some glass in front of it. The same I used for the ramp. Unfortunately, that's what I have to live with. A glass door, because we don't have animated doors that can open and close. So the guests will walk right through it, like they do through every other door we put into the game. This too gets a frame made out of a metal rod, and after I built the frame, I decided to give it some handles, or I don't know what it's called, something to push against to open and close the door. I made it out of signs in the game and copied it for both sides. Checking the height with my human dummy, I thought it looked rather decent or good. But now for the most important part, how does it look from the inside? And for this I will show you a little aspect of my work, because you can't just go with the camera through the walls. You have to go over the top of the lagoon every time you want to change from the inside to the outside of the building. And you can imagine I did this a whole lot of times. From this perspective you see nothing of the lagoon walls, and your guest will neither. They will just walk through the entrance. And again I will crank up the speed to nearly 30,000 times, skipping some path work, redoing the ramp in the guest area because the angle wasn't right, a few more rocks, designing the naturalistic outside, tons of glass and concrete, even more rocks to make it pretty and hide any imperfections. Some work with the floor and the invisible crown of the ramp, some more concrete, trims, and finally a little bit of flowery power in the lagoon. Because it's a guest area, it shouldn't look sterile, even in a clean futuristic scenario. And so we finally come to, well, this subway station full of people. I hope it's just that crowded because this is at the moment the only attraction my guests can come to and visit. And full disclosure, the first person view does just work with a little bit of movie magic. Because in first person mode you can't go through the walls or the doors. So here you have to cut, move the camera, go there, and then action. If you want to take pictures, play around with the lighting, because the visibility inside the lagoon is quite different in daylight or dusk or midday or at night. And as you have noticed, looking from the outside of the lagoon through glass into the lagoon itself, that looks like if the swimming reptiles are in mid-air. You don't have the water effect when you look from the outside into the lagoon through the walls. I haven't found a solution for that yet, so if you have an idea, please tell me. Decals for that matter didn't cut it. And just like that, my build was done. Or was it? Take a guess in the comments what you think I want to build in next, and update this crazy lagoon with. Consider to subscribe and like this video to not miss the next one. Until then, have fun building.